The modern media landscape is a complicated web of competing industries, consumers, creators, and destroyers, wherein the top dogs, the institutions that once held its users in the palm of their hands, are now on the latter side of an ongoing race with its own audiences. The introduction of Web 2.0 has seen the fall of the now archaic hierarchical system of production and reception, and now in its place comes an increase of power and influence for the average person. But just how noticeable is this difference? How much agency have audiences really gained? The methods with which we can distribute media have changed immensely over the years. In the early 20th century, newspapers, radio, and television were the essential platforms, competing with one another to be the first thing that its consumers experienced when they got home from work or woke up in the morning. It was a simple system that relied on the big, wealthy institutions to produce and for the voiceless masses to consume, much like a mother bird feeding their baby chicks. It was essentially a one-way relationship, and the best an individual could do to have any influence was to be one of the lucky few with enough wealth to have their voice heard. Today, however, this is very different. The internet is an unrestricted game that anyone with a device and an internet connection can participate in, meaning that the line between distributor and audience has been blurred to such an extent that the two definitions have begun to lose meaning entirely. Take YouTube, for example, the very platform you are likely watching this on. It costs absolutely nothing for someone like me to type youtube.com into a search bar, create an account, and upload any sort of video I please, following the appropriate rules, of course. Hundreds, if not thousands of people have done and continue to do this as their primary source of income. Lachlan and Jackson Fairbairn, commonly known together as Fairbairn Films, at current ages 22 and 20 respectively, joined the platform in 2014 and since then have gained a reputation as one of Australia's biggest YouTube channels, gaining the attention of the news and comedy groups such as Auntie Donna. Also, Tommy Innit is only 2 months older than me. So what is it exactly that separates independent creators on YouTube and social media from other institutions? Well, the accessible nature of the internet means that it's much harder to regulate than any other media platform by far. The ACMA, the Australian Communication and Media Authority, decides the codes of practice that radio and television are advised to abide by in Australia, a list of specific rules outlining what broadcasters can and should do. It's daunting to imagine this when you realise that there's over 400 licensed community radio stations and 35 free-to-air television channels, not even including digital stations, in Australia. But this seems trivial in comparison to what happens on the internet. Keeping in mind that it's a global platform, on YouTube alone, 500 hours of video are uploaded every minute, equating to 720,000 hours every single day. Even if governments wanted to regulate every piece of content that goes up, it would be a Herculean task that would almost certainly not be worth the effort. Which is why it's rather nice that YouTube, like most, is a self-regulated platform, meaning that even here in Australia, government regulations don't apply, which means that I don't have to abide by code 2.1D in the subscription broadcast television codes of practice, disallowing programs designed to induce a hypnotic state in the audience. Because this doesn't fall under the ACMA's regulation, and channels exist that actually upload content designed for hypnosis. The fact that almost all platforms on the internet are self-regulatory means that what one can publish is very different to what they can do on the telly and the radio. Audience agency can reach further than this, however. In all corners of the media landscape, there are communities known as fandoms. Groups of people who are rarely associated with one another, if not for their connection with a certain piece of media. These can range from small but loyal cult followings to expansive groups, all with a love for a certain book, movie, video game, artist, board game, you name it. They make their own works inspired by the product, dress as their favorite character, and in some cases can even have a notable impact on that very piece of media. Kickstarter relies on these groups of firm supporters in order to get independent productions into completion. If a creator wants their product to be funded, they simply advertise their intention, outline the desired amount, and hope that the internet rallies to their cause. Now, not all Kickstarter campaigns are so successful. In fact, a large amount never leave the ground. But occasionally you come across an idea too good not to garner some attention. When the small Australian group Team Cherry was creating their passion project, their goal of $35,000 was massively overtaken, reaching a final total of $57,138 from over 2,000 backers. The project was massively successful and gave them the financial and moral boost they needed to produce Hollow Knight, what is now one of the most famous indie games ever produced. Through the power of mass online support, it's no longer just big companies that can make waves in the media industry. But just as easily as the community can bring life into something, so too can they destroy it. Cancel culture is a recent phenomenon sparked primarily from movements such as Black Lives Matter and Me Too, and it has raised some uproar in recent years. In colloquial terms, to cancel is to put an abrupt end to someone or something's influence, whether temporarily or permanently, in reaction to a controversial statement or decision made by that target. This is done almost exclusively on social media platforms like Twitter, via mass boycotting in which the woke generation rallies together in order to wipe their target off the face of social media and guarantee their voice will never have influence for the end of time. Or at least until they say sorry. Now, this matter remains a tumultuous subject to dip one's toes into, because while the removal of Chris Lilley's content from all streaming platforms and television can be accepted as another step away from the outdated values of our country's past, others could argue that it proves to be an example of mob mentality with dangerous implications. If we can't have the golden Gaytime because its name has implications of homosexuality, despite there being no relation between the two, where will the line be drawn? What's next? Calippo? Now, I won't humour the idea of giving my opinion in the argument, but cancel culture stands as another key example of how the development of Web 2.0 has given audiences more influence on that which they consume than ever. But I know what you're thinking. Posting some funny videos on the internet or building a worldwide phenomenon from the ground up and wielding the power to simultaneously destroy it is great and all, but I want to make a difference in more than just the media world. Well, that is just as plausible in today's modern landscape, not only within Australia, but across the globe. The rapid globalisation of the media means that countries initially separated by differences in land, language, and culture now can establish quick and accessible connections with one another with real-world implications. On December 17, 2010, Tunisian fruit and vegetable seller Mohamed Bouazizi set himself aflame in a public demonstration against the oppressive government that had been ruling his country for years. It sparked a massive outbreak of posts on Twitter featuring the hashtag Sidi Bouzid, named after the city in which it took place. Posts featured images and videos of protests, police abuse and violent suppression, garnering attention from people across the globe who all expressed sympathy for the people of Tunisia. The series of events escalated into a rapid movement where hackers from Anonymous broke into the government's database, Time magazine got involved with the story, and soon action was being taken in other countries. Inspired by the Tunisian movement, similar protests were sparked in Egypt that gained so much attention that even the US government became involved. The series of protests came to be known as the Arab Spring, as it spread to many other countries, and is a key example of social media activism. With enough attention on social media, individuals can influence real-world action. Yet, therein lies the problem. In a somewhat paradoxical way, the more voices there are in this vast expanse of internet, the harder it is for each one to be heard. To quote Syndrome, if everyone's super, no one is. So how is it decided? Who is looked upon kindly by the hands of fate, and whose voice goes unheard? How is one to have influence? Enter Bib Latané. Latané's social impact theory explains what factors come into play when determining how much influence one's voice is to have. He narrows it down to three key elements: strength, immediacy, and numbers, which can easily be remembered by the acronym SIN. Strength refers to how reputable of a source one is due to a series of individual factors such as wealth, experience, or intellect. Put simply, who would you be more likely to listen to? A renowned journalist with extensive experience and a degree in politics, or a 17-year-old kid with a microphone? Strength can also refer to simply one's demeanor and how they deliver their argument, because conviction is everything. Immediacy refers to how physically, psychologically, and temporally close one is to the subject at hand. Someone who lives in Australia will be more trustworthy for Australian news. Someone who makes a living by viewing and analysing films will be a more reputable source for cinema criticism. And someone who comments on a story a day after it happens will generally be more connected to it than one who does a week later. The closer you are to something, the more immediacy you have, thus the more influential you are. Numbers, entailing exactly what it sounds like, refers to the amount of sources giving influence, whether it be as a group or via one speaker. The more sources I have backing a statement, the more researched and thus accurate it seems. And if 10 people in the room are telling you to do something, they are almost certainly going to be more convincing than a single outlier telling you to do the opposite. Now, these factors can provide us with reasons as to why all of these other previous examples are as noteworthy as they are. While Team Cherry may not have had the wealth or reputation that other companies did, the strength of the concept they were delivering was what got people interested and gave them the success that they needed. The creators of Fairbairn Films connected to a largely Australian audience, appealing to the values of their own home country, and in many cases commenting on events as they happened for that immediacy level. The Arab Spring movement emerged from the discontent of an entire country's population, and rallied immense numbers of supporters to its cause, sparking real-world action. The media industry belongs to those who use it best. So if you've come to any conclusion, it's that over the course of the development of the media and Web 2.0, audiences have gained much more significant agency in what they can create and what others create. The average viewer's influence can stem into real-world territory under the right circumstances. The power of the individual has definitely increased, but how one can express that agency greatly varies. If we may think back once more to the past, there once were only two sides to the equation: the media and the audience, the lucky few and the general populace. But now, it's anyone's game. You just have to know what you're doing.